welcome one and all. This afternoon session is going to run for 2 hours. One or two quick housekeeping rules before we start. The session is being recorded. Both the recording and the slides will be made available afterwards. There will hopefully be ample opportunity over the course of these 2 hours for you to ask any questions. You can ask these directly at any stage within using the chat function in Teams, but also hopefully there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand during the question and answer session and ask those directly. Anything that we don't get a chance to look at today during the session, hopefully we can also answer offline later, as there's a lot to be packed into the session. If there are any technical issues, we've already encountered one or two of those. My colleague Alessandra is available and you could send an email directly to her to try to deal with any of those. So very quickly, the objectives of today's session. As you may have all noticed, on Monday, what we considered to be quite a significant publication was released. The second Circular Cities Declaration report, the CCD report 2024, which reported on the individual activities of 53 different Circular Cities Declaration signatories on what they're doing in terms of circular economy, including a couple of deep dive sections looking at one or two very pertinent issues in more detail. So using that as the basis, we want today's session to be a stock taking, looking at how cities are implementing the circular economy and showcasing just how important a role they have to play within this environment. More specifically, we're then going to look in detail at two topics. One of those is how circular economy is being used to achieve climate goals by the cities. On the one hand, something which those who've been present in the World Circular Economy Forum over the last couple of days will have heard a great deal about. And then another topic which perhaps doesn't get as much notice within the circular economy field as it ought to, and that is how this is also linked to the idea of regenerating nature within cities as well. What we're trying to do through the presentations that we have today is share the experiences and best practices of some of those cities which have reported, and showing how these benefits can be achieved through the solutions that they are implementing. And on top of this, we also want to look more explicitly at what different challenges cities are facing in accelerating and scaling up the transition, and the different types of solutions that are being used for this. So, quick run through of the agenda. We have a number of speakers with us today. Hopefully we'll have time to get to everybody. I'm sure we will. So first of all, Josh Newton from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is going to present the main findings from the report. We then have Ander Ezagir from the OECD to also share the experiences that they've had over the last few years running their Circular Economy in Cities and Regions program. We'll then pass across to two of our city examples, first of all from the city of Oslo in Norway, and then from Esch-sur-Alzette in Luxembourg. And at this stage, there will be an opportunity to ask any questions of the speakers. We'll then shift across to our second topic of the day, where Christine Strandberg from the Circular Economy Foundation will give us an introductory presentation on the missing piece, regenerating nature. And then to our final two city examples, where we have Turku in Finland and Copenhagen in Denmark. And again, following this, there will be an opportunity to ask any questions at the end, and hopefully we will be finished by 4 o'clock. So before we kick off, I imagine that the majority of people participating in the webinar will have heard of the Circular Cities Declaration, but for us to give a very short introduction to this, the declaration is in essence a commitment document which local and regional governments across Europe can sign up to, the idea being to help accelerate the transition from a linear to a circular economy in Europe, and really using the tools at the disposal of cities and regions to help achieve this. The declaration itself was developed by a very broad group of support partners. I won't go through them all in detail, but they're listed there in the bottom left of the screen, and includes both Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Circle Economy, who are joining us in the session today. The OECD has also been very closely involved in the work that we're doing as well. The declaration has 4 explicit goals. First and foremost, it provides an opportunity for cities to communicate their commitment to the circular transition, both at the local level, but also at the national and European and even international level as well. The declaration, secondly, provides a shared vision of what we mean by a circular city. Thirdly, it also then underlines what we see as the very critical role that local governments play in this arena, and tries to bring that message through to the policymaking arena at the European level. And finally, what we're also trying to do through the declaration is establish an informal community to share experiences, challenges, and successes, for example, through the webinar that we're having today. Here's a quick list of the current signatories. And in fact, there's some breaking news here. I think in a room literally next door to us here, we're having our latest signatory signing the document, which is the Metropolitan Region of Amsterdam. And they will be joining 82, I believe, existing signatories that we have that you can see here across 23 different European countries. And this ranges from very big metropolitan capital cities to much smaller towns and cities as well. Plenty more information about the declaration you can find online, but I will stop here. No, last slide before I pass across. If you do want to find out more information about the declaration, you can either email us on the address below, or you can visit the website and find out more information there. Signing the declaration is something that's free of charge. What we simply ask is to have a high-level political representative, a mayor, a vice mayor or equivalent, to sign this, and of course through that to publicly note their willingness to follow the commitments that are in the declaration as well. So if anyone is interested in this, please do get in touch. Good, and on that note, I shall stop sharing my screen and we shall pass across to our first presentation. Josh, over to you to give us some of the main findings from this year's report, and hopefully our technology works.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here and a lovely opportunity to share in the success of ICLEI as well as Circle and the work that we've done together on writing this report. As you mentioned, Simon, just then, we like to think that this is quite a significant report. I would go as far as saying it represents the most comprehensive record of local circular economy implementation in Europe to date. The report is full of best practices from across 54 city signatories of the declaration, as well as the two deep dives that you mentioned on measurement and nature. It allows us to kind of reflect on where we are currently, especially in those deep dives, and think about where we need to go together and individually. So in my time today, I'm going to kind of run through the main findings on how cities are implementing, and then talk about the measurement and climate aspects before we give way to the cities to talk about climate. And then obviously Kristen will follow up on the deep dive on nature. But this first slide, hopefully, that you can see kind of just illustrates some of the big figures, the 54 who we consulted, who fed back in the reporting, as well as the over 200 different actions that we identified through the city reports. The main takeaway I would say from this session, from the report really, is capturing progress on the 10 commitments that cities sign up to as part of the declaration. So what we can see from compared to the first report from 2022 is that there is steady progress on all of the 10 actions that we think cities can take. Some greater progress than others. You can see cities are increasingly adopting goals and strategies, which we'll come on to in a bit. Cities are increasingly comfortable engaging with local stakeholders. We can see, however, there are also areas that do require further thinking and further support. How cities can apply economic incentives, how cities can make use of their local regulatory framework. Ultimately, yeah, progress is steady, but for us to reach that score of 5, which we use to describe systemic solutions, more actions are needed everywhere and among all cities to really achieve systemic change. When we think about how cities start, and as you saw, where cities are most comfortable, it's setting that vision. And now we're seeing the first insight of the report really is that now over half of cities have a dedicated circular economy strategy or action plan, something that ultimately can set a direction for your local circular transition. Equally, though, what I think is really important is that around a quarter of cities also don't have a standalone circular economy strategy. And in fact, what they're doing is they're embedding circular economy into other strategies, things like local plans, I think maybe like local economic strategies. So there is no necessarily right way or wrong way to integrate circular economy into policy making locally. There are a number of routes depending on resources. What we're also seeing from reports is that most cities indicate that they now have dedicated staff working on the circular economy. Often this is 1, 2, 3, maybe staff that are working full time on circular economy topics, but these are also backed up by cross-departmental collaboration, a way of breaking down silos. Ultimately, what we like to encourage is that the circular economy is a framework to tackle local goals or global goals. And so the idea of circular economy staying in an individual department is very narrow-minded, and actually it's about creating opportunities so people have responsibility for circular economy in procurement, in planning, in business, as well as waste. And crucially as well, it's about working with external stakeholders and other agencies. One really great example that's really simple is Eskilstuna in Sweden, who talked about they having integrated governance approach where they have this full-time person working on circular economy and then also working with a wider working group of circular economy leads in all the different departments. This, along with all other 54 cities, are featured in all the deep dives. And so it's great to kind of pick out these and look through those in your own time. In terms of the other kind of main insights from the implementation aspect, it may come as no surprise, but the areas that were most commonly picked up in strategies were, of course, food and bioeconomy, as well as the built environment. I think this is notable or maybe also unremarkable because we all know the impact, the environmental impact, both climate, nature, and waste that food and built environment have, and what cities have to grapple with relating to those. But what we're also seeing is that around a third of all actions cross across value chains. So it's not just thinking about vertical, but thinking horizontal about how you can promote circular actions. For example, promoting repair, which cuts across things like textiles and electronics and consumer goods, as well as mobility. But also campaigns and promoting circular lifestyles, which does relate to all the different value chains. Like the 2022 report, challenges also were fairly common that cropped up across 70% of cities. So those highlighted resources have met the main challenge. So that is largely funding, but also personnel and limited capacity, as well as skills and knowledge. I think the idea that we talked about in the first slide on governance on the right kind of is a way to maybe overcome that challenge. But what we also found that there were other challenges that cities are grappling with, a complex policy framework ultimately. So that is around this lack of coordination across the city and conflicting policies and legislation or limited powers that cities have to grapple with versus national governments. So promoting that better dialogue between national and local is really important. So that was maybe the first part, and I'll run briefly into the deep dive with the time I have. But ultimately, one of the deep dives looked at measurement. What we here at the Foundation, as well as ICLEI and Circle, is that how cities can measure and why they should measure is increasingly being questioned, particularly when there's pressure to kind of deliver on climate goals. So what we asked cities how they're measuring, what their understanding of it was. And what really came away with was the idea that cities can't measure everything. They shouldn't be measuring everything. But what measurement is for is really to kind of set a baseline, understand a direction of travel, and simply to inform in future actions, as well as invest resources. So we found in the deep dive lots of best practices that we don't have time to go into. But some of the key insights really on this were that cities, firstly, are increasingly joining the dots on how to measure circular economy relating to climate goals. So Usually a common starting point on the circular economy for cities is usually waste reduction targets. What we're seeing is now nearly half of all cities actually see climate goals as the main driver for why they're adopting new circular economy interventions. This is super encouraging because it's a way of framing that circular economy is not just a waste or a recycling agenda, it's a way to tackle lots of different global goals. At the same time, cities were also very forthcoming that the existing climate goals may not go far enough to truly unlock the emissions that circular economy can help with, i.e. those import emissions or consumption-based emissions that come from outside of the city boundary that aren't necessarily included in net zero goals. That said, what we are seeing is that a number of front-runner cities across Europe and elsewhere around the world are beginning to set more specific upstream goals. And that is underpinned by adopting consumption-based emissions or Scope 3 targets, but also met goals and targets that specifically relate to circular economy principles. So the principles being eliminate, circulate, regenerate. We're seeing cities like Haarlem, capital region Denmark, adopting material reduction goals, specifically about reducing the amount of virgin material they use or increasing the amount of secondary recycled materials. We're seeing cities like Copenhagen and Ghent begin adopting reuse targets, which is really exciting. Copenhagen, obviously, that's not new. They've been doing it for a while, but we're seeing cities in Belgium now adopting this, places elsewhere. And then now we're also starting to see cities set more tangible goals around nature, which Kristen will come on to as well. Fingal in Ireland have a goal to halt biodiversity loss, I think by 2030. And another example, which is more tangible, is Rotterdam just simply have a goal to increase the amount of green space as a surface in the city. So that's the first set of insights on measurement around targets. Specifically around indicators or other things that cities can be measuring, we're seeing that 2/3 of cities are actually now developing or have developed already a more holistic framework for measuring the circular economy. This is super encouraging again because it's showing that circular economy is not just a waste or a climate agenda. People are using it to measure social impacts, socio-economic impacts as well. But that said, there is very little consistency across cities, and this is a real challenge for maybe stakeholders like ourselves, but also cities to compare and contrast and know what are real impactful solutions. So at the moment, we see that very few cities are using existing common frameworks out there. Some cities, around 43%, are using a national framework or aligning to the EU monitoring framework. Cities are also maybe adopting a material flow analysis, but these are, I guess, subjective to the context and dependent on lots of downscaling of different sorts of data. There is therefore a challenge that what we need to encourage is cities to kind of work together on metrics, which we'll come on to. But one example, I mentioned Eskilstuna before about governance. One really great example of measuring progress and communicating that is Helsinki. They don't have too much, I guess, tangible impact measures because they are really difficult to track. But what they are doing is publishing progress against all the individual actions that they've cited in their circular economy action plan. So their online tracker, which we mentioned here and we dive deeper into in the measurement deep dive, is a really good example to kind of look into further. I will end on this slide, which I think is important for our city speakers to especially make note of. But through the report, we found again and again the same kind of challenges coming up or the same kind of solutions that we're identifying among cities. The first kind of key message and final key message to maybe go away is that cities cannot really deliver on the circular cities vision alone in isolation. It is only possible through collaboration with other actors. So working closer with national policymakers, working with businesses, civil society, and of course, citizens. But really what we think is that the best way of turbocharging circular actions locally are these 6 priority actions that we want all cities to think about going forwards. You can dive deeper into them in the report, and maybe we can discuss them a little at length, but they are working towards common circular economy metrics, setting more ambitious targets, including on consumption-based emissions, integrating circular economy across city departments, which can help you unlock resources, the need to continue developing and innovating new systemic solutions and actions, the fundamental need to advocate for a new paradigm, working with national policymakers and international EU policymakers, and then finally to embed nature in all decision making. Kristen will hopefully come on to this in a little bit. I have stuck to my time a little, I think, Simon, so I will leave it there. But thank you all for having me today.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Josh. I think you stuck to your time. I didn't stick to my time, so we're running slightly over, but that's always to be expected here. But this excellent presentation. If we can, of course, only show a very small fraction of the information that's contained within that report here. We have presentations from 4 out of the 54 signatories that have reported there. So I would, of course, encourage everybody to look into that report, to look at the inspirational examples from the cities and the deeper analysis there as well. But we'll have to move on with the agenda now, and we are going to move across to Anda Ezaguirre from the OECD to have some interesting reflections from their side on the work that they have been doing with cities and regions, and seeing how that chimes with the findings that we've made ourselves within the CCD. So Anda, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. And first of all, apologies because I'm having some connection issues. So in case you cannot hear me, just let me know and I will remove my camera. Very briefly, I would like to share our experience in the OECD program on the circular economy in cities and regions, which has been working for the last 5 years. And well, basically find and share the main links and findings that we have made related to these 2 topics that you are selecting for this session today on the environment, sustainability, and on the monitoring and measurement. So we basically in this program since 2019, we have provided targeted support to more than 10 case studies, more than 10 cities in the OECD, from in Spain, in Netherlands, in Sweden, and in Estonia, among others. And right now we are working on collaborating with the European Commission's Circular Cities and Regions initiative to provide a bit of support in how to analyze the subnational aspects of cities and regions in the EU to contribute to the European Union goals on the circular economy. We also organize roundtables, so we organize a network of cities and regions that we meet annually. And in fact, tomorrow we are organizing the 6th version of this roundtable. And we have also worked a bit on the measurement and on the monitoring. First, we have developed a tool, a self-assessment tool for cities and regions, so they can self-assess where they stand in terms of 12 governance dimensions that we have identified. And we the monitoring through an inventory that we carried out. We identify motors from more than 25 circular economy strategies. I'd like to maybe to share the main outcomes of this stuff. And the first one is that most of the indicators were focusing on the environment, followed by the governance, I mean, in terms of the regulation, financing, followed by the economic and business, which was basically measured in terms of the number of companies or the number of companies adopting circular business models. And then last but not least, we had a few, or we identified very little and a low number of indicators focusing on the society. For instance, in terms of the well, based on this work that we did on the monitoring, I would like to share with you some main gaps that we identified. So the first one is that there is a lack of an agreed definition. So we identified and we analyzed that
Under the connection is
cities and regions were using and measuring this a different
and the connection is really poor.
Okay, is it now better?
Well, let's try one last time, but the connection for the last minute or so was really quite broken, unfortunately. Maybe one last try.
Okay, yeah. So basically, just to conclude maybe with the main challenges is that most of the cities were measuring in the indicators in cities and regions were data driven. There was a strong focus on waste because basically these are the indicators available at the city level, and also we saw that there were different a lack of integration between the different levels of government. So what some cities were measuring, it was measured in a different way at the national level. And just to conclude, I would like to invite cities and regions present in the session today to take a survey that we are working with the European Commission. So if you are a government official from an EU country, we would like to invite you to take this survey where we basically will analyze which is the state of the art of the circular economy at the European Union level and in the cities of the European Union. So apologies again for my connection and looking forward to following up. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Ander. Shame about the technical problems we have, but we will certainly share these slides as well, the slide afterwards, so that viewers can take a look at that survey. It would, of course, be very interesting for you to have a look at the conclusions of the CCD report, particularly those looking at monitoring and indicators. And obviously, there's some alignment in the findings that we've had. And I think clearly there's a common agreement that there's a lot of work need to be done there in terms of alignment. But thanks very much, Ander, and hopefully some of us will be present at the roundtable tomorrow. As well. So as we are running a little bit behind time, we will pass across now to the first of our city presentations. So from one of the signatories, and the first up is the city of Oslo, represented by Sigrun Jaren, talking about, yes, how circular economy can be a lever to achieve climate goals. So Sigrun, over to you.
Thanks very much. I have a lot of slides, so I will just get on. And I guess all of you know where Oslo is. We have around 700,000 inhabitants, and around half of them live in single households by themselves, which is somehow important when we kind of design our waste system, at least. Our essential policy documents are the comprehensive strategy on circular economy that that was adapted in 2023. Previously, we have had also a strategy for future consumption. We have had climate strategies for Oslo since 2015 and climate budgets since 2017. New for this year, from 2024, we have a target on indirect emissions in our budgets. And the target is that Oslo's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions generated outside the municipality will be substantially lower in 2030 than in 2020. The target is far vaguer than the targets we have for direct emissions, and there is a reason for this, and that it's really difficult to measure, and also we have fewer instruments for it. But we are on just to kind of make clear what we put in this each of those, the scope 1 emissions that are inside the border of the city, our emissions that we have been measuring for a long time, scope 2 emissions, that is the energy that is used in the city but generated outside the city. This has a separate climate target, and we don't really follow that up through the target for the indirect emissions. which are like everything going on outside the city borders that are caused by activities in the city, like upstream and downstream. It's like if we send our waste outside, or if citizens are going for holidays, or if we buy goods that are produced somewhere else, or also if we have if people in Oslo are investing in stocks that have effects outside the city. 3 very important points when it comes to our indirect emissions. It's that they are estimated to be about 10 to 13 times larger than the direct emissions, and they have to be drastically reduced in order to reach the 1.5 degree goal from the Paris Agreement. And in general, the municipalities, they lack measures to address the consumption of the citizens and the businesses, but we are also a really big consumer ourselves. The direct emissions, as we have had them measured by sector for many years, we have around half of the emissions that come from road transport, 1/4 from waste incineration and energy supply, and half of a quarter from other mobile combustion. In the circular economy, we have 4 target areas that we are working on that also influence the indirect emissions. That's consumption and trade, construction, resources from waste, and innovation. And we have, although it's challenging to get an overview, we can really extract good data where we have it, and to get an indication of the indirect emissions. And we have been looking at the city's purchases through the city's procurement systems. It doesn't give a complete emissions account, but it's at least a start of an indicator set and that we can use. And as a really big buyer, the city of Oslo, it's buying goods and services for like 2.5 billion euro per year. We can really affect what is produced, and we can promote repair and reuse, and we can demand that there are reused materials in what we buy, and also create a market for services and repairs. The city is trying to motivate to reduce the consumption of consumables, and we have this how we are trying to do this systemized in this ASI diagram, like what we should avoid buying new products. We should shift some of our habits to replace new products with reused ones. We should use rental and sharing schemes. And we should improve by choosing products with recycled materials and lower footprints. And of course, better quality, so that we don't need to replace it so soon. Transport, that is important. It's taken care of in our climate strategy, and therefore we don't have it as a focus area in our circular economy, because we are like considering it already taken care of. And same with sustainable food. We are having we have a separate action plan for sustainable, healthy, and more plant-based food in Oslo, which is handling this. So the second target area in the circular economy, that is construction, which is an area where it's traditionally huge emissions, both directly and indirectly. For the direct emissions, that's like 12 to 13% of the city's direct emissions. but also on the indirect part with the materials, which are produced other places and maybe have a large transport distance before they even come to Oslo. And we are also here working towards a fossil-free construction sites, both our own projects and also when we are buying things from others. And we have there a target to reduce our climate gas emissions from materials in new and rehabilitated constructions by at least 30%. And
Sigrun, I'm afraid I'm going to have to rush you a little bit. This is fascinating, but we're running a little short of time, so maybe another minute or two.
Yes, that's okay. For the waste industry's operational strategy, that we use the waste hierarchy, where we have the most favorable option at the top and less favorable coming down. And we are working, of course, in the city to reduce waste and to reuse as much as possible. When the waste is when the goods are defined as waste and coming to recycling, that's when we get to handle it. And it's really important for us to get it as clean as possible, so it's easier to recycle. And what is not possible to recycle, we do incinerate with energy recovery. And we have around 3% landfill of our materials in Norway, or in Oslo, I think. I think I will just go to one of the materials here. It's the plastic packaging, which we are trying to material recycle as much as possible. We are able to sort around 40% of our plastics, which is then sent to a central facility for further treatment, and around 40% of it there, or 42% last year was recycled into new materials, which means that of the plastic on the market, it's like 20% that is actually becoming new materials, and the rest of it's incinerated either in Oslo because it's going with the residual waste, or as coming as indirect emissions for us, as it's going becoming energy somewhere else closer to the sorting facility. And that's yeah, I can talk a little bit more about that actually, because that's yeah, we do need this energy for our heating, and okay, I'm stopping there.
That's fine. It's a complex discussion, of course, Sigrun, but
yeah,
thank you so much for this presentation. Really very interesting, and I think we could listen to Oslo's examples and experience for a very long time. I'm sorry to have to rush you here. There is, of course, more information in the report, and I know that Oslo is also very good at publishing material about what it's doing as well. And hopefully we can come back to those with some of the questions later also. But thank you very much, Sigrun. Let's pass now across to Esch-sur-Alzette. And hopefully we have two speakers who will be co-presenting, I believe. So
yeah.
If you are with us, maybe you can start sharing your screen.
Sharing the screen.
Perfect. So Gernot and Eric.
You see the screen?
We can see the screen, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a short presentation. My name is Gernot. I'm head of the ecological department of the city of Esch.
My name is Eric Kleibisch, working for Transition Minute, local environmental NGO, and working a lot with Jana and his team on different topics, and especially on circular economy.
Yeah, something special also for the city of Esch is quite good collaboration with different NGOs on our territory. Okay, so we're going to focus a little bit on our approaches here in Luxembourg, and we have something that is called Pact Klima, which is essentially a governmental tool for, let's say, considers main areas: climate, mobility, energy, and communication. And over all these areas, there are also circular economy aspects for every of this area integrated in these catalogs. So it's a sort of catalog giving you points when you have done this, retrieving your points when you did not have done this, etc., etc. So just to conclude, the city of Esch is already gold certificated. It is based on the European Energy Award, which is a known program in Europe. So the Pact Klima is basically implemented in Luxembourg as European Energy Award. We are actually already gold certificated. And we are the second city in Luxembourg who achieved this additional certification concerning circular economy. So we improve a lot on our circular economy goals. So the overall goal of this Pact Klima is emission reduction by 55% till 2030. Actually, the city of Esch should be around 15% around this area. So we have a lot to do for the next year to achieve our goals. Few words: we have an urban development master plan who considers a lot of impact on nature and low carbon emissions, as well as also existing districts. So we're trying to combine new districts, but also work on the existing districts to work on decarbonization and also on circular approaches on existing districts. I'm just focusing now a little bit on newer districts or low carbon districts where we integrate all measures that are possible around the circular economy. So the approach also is focusing a lot actually on climate change and climate change adaptation, because we know we will have water problems in our area. That's why we plan also our master plan for existing districts and also for new districts already tries to reuse water, tries to collect rainwater, to distribute this water in some intelligent approaches. We try to use water also as energy storage for heat or cold with heat pump system, etc. We try to implement much more green and blue spaces in rural areas, so in the core city, and also on new districts. We plan a lot of climate adaptation or adapted plans, buildings that don't need as much heating and for at much lower cooling power, so to be very prepared already for warmer weather that will come next decades, let's say. Buildings, low carbon construction. We have, for example, made a card that gives us an idea what is the actual carbon we have in the whole city in the building materials. So considered the buildings are built of stones and of wood and so on. So we have a whole inventory of this carbon that is stocked in the city, and we have an idea how many could be reused and could be used in the next decades to reconstruct or to get buildings more efficient in the next years. On energy, most goals go to decarbonization of the energy. So going back or leaving fossil energies and coming to renewable energies. So for new districts, this is no problem. You can use sun, geothermal, heat pumps, photovoltaics. A very important point for us is solar cooling, as I consider solar cooling also as part of a circular economy, because you have the cooling power, so the heat, you can heat with cool with heat. So you have the power when you need it. So when it's extremely hot and great solar irradiation, you have power to make a lot of cooling power. So we consider this also as approach on circular economy, because we use this energy otherwise. Mobility is a very big point for us, as we also saw Oslo. Most of the carbon print is mobility. For us, it's approximately the same. We try to decarbonize also mobility, and we try to use these parking lots not only as parking lots, but as mobility hubs or even as service hubs. So to make just more out of them as parking lots, so this building could later perhaps reused as other or can be reaffected to another use in the future. So all these ideas, just to put them in 10 minutes, is quite difficult, but I'm trying my best. We're working on, and this for new districts, but also for the existing districts. But on the existing districts, it's quite difficult to implement things because you don't have often the place, the areas you need, and yes, it's not an integrated planning, and here you can make integrated plannings.
So last slide, and another topic to also make a link to restoring and protecting nature locally. So we've chosen local biomass and food production as our last topic that we'd like to highlight. Just as a side note information, half of Esch's territory are green spaces that are protected by Natura 2000 zones and our biospheres and so on. So we are lucky that half of the territory is already a green space, and for the rest, we have local vegetable production that is spread all over the city, partially in these protected nature reserves. The vegetables that are produced locally are distributed to or used in the local canteens, in the schools, sold to local restaurants, so that we have like this circular movement approach in terms of local vegetable production, even if it's only a very small fraction of what is needed locally. Then we also, to include citizens, provide small plots of farmland, so to encourage citizens to grow their own food. So we have over 500 plots that are currently rented out to citizens here from Esch that are being used. On top of that, we have public community gardens all over the city. There are 7 in total, 3 new in the making. And last but not least, to keep the nutrients in Esch's soil, we also have a local compost and mulch production. So it's the bio waste, organic waste that we turn into compost and mulch locally, and the company is located here in Esch. And that being said, we'll stop here. That's it from.
No, we have 30 seconds left. We're just in time. City of Esch is a small city. We have 37,000 inhabitants. Our dimension is 14 square kilometers, so a quite small commune, but very reactive, and a lot of projects going on in the city. So we can finish just over there, and I'm just at 10 minutes and 2 seconds.
Jean, Eric, thank you very much for your very, very firm timekeeping as well. And yes, as you say, Esch is a much smaller city, of course, than Oslo, but a city with huge ambitions, and really interesting to hear just how comprehensive those activities, how ambitious and innovative some of the things that you guys are doing as well. And a lot to learn for many, many cities of a similar size, of course, around Europe as well. So thanks to both of the cities for the presentations. We do have an opportunity now for any questions. You can either put your hand up or put them directly in the chat. As you guys are perhaps thinking about some questions to ask, maybe I can raise one or two myself. Sigrun, if I can turn to you first of all. I think it's really interesting the scope, the focus that you're now putting on scope 3 emissions within the city. Of course, this is something that's extremely challenging. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the efforts that you're taking to stimulate this reduced consumption and increased reuse in the city, because of course this is quite a challenging area to work on.
Yeah, thanks. We are trying to make different arenas in Oslo for doing this, and on the kind of individual consumption, we are having when people come with goods to our recycling stations, then we have contracts with some charities to come there and can take out what they wanted to do, to sell it in charity shops. And whatever they don't take out and that we think might be worth trying to take back into the cycle, we are having we are also having sales from our location to a very low price, and it's really popular. People come there and get different kind of equipment for houses and books and pictures and skis and whatever. And also we have it's actually nationwide in Norway. We have something we call it BUA, and it's where we are lending out. It's run by the city. We are lending out sports equipment for free. So those are kind of small, or not small scale things, but they are kind of on the individual things there. I think they are, and also we try to help making these platforms for it. Yeah, we are. We try to encourage that this should go on without us running it.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep a close eye on what's happening there, Sigrun, and of course how you're measuring your progress with those actions as well. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but before I get onto those, maybe I can quickly pass back across to Jeannot and Eric. And you mentioned yourself, you're a smaller city, and of course with smaller human resources, financial resources in which to act. I wonder, are there any specific challenges that you guys are facing because of that you see?
Specific challenges, yes, for sure. We have specific challenges, but we also have specific chances. Let's say, or let's start with these. As the city is small, our politicians, or the contact to our political leaders, yes, is quite comfortable and quite easy. So decision making is just like this. So we have a project, we have an idea. As politicians, can we do this? What do you think about this? And it's go or no go, and it's as simple as this. And then the problem comes. Yes, you have go, and you don't have the resources to do it, and you need some help on different levels and on the different departments. And it's not always easy to convince people to participate or to change. Simply to change. Change is never easy for people to make, and that's a little bit the challenges we face. We have a good political decisions, or easy political decisions. We're lacking of manpower, as most of manpower, working power, as most of the cities, and we face, I think, all the challenges that it's difficult to get people to change. And I think most cities will have these problems and these discussions.
Absolutely, and hopefully this.
No, it's fine. Please go ahead.
Very good. No, I was just going to mention that hopefully this is some area that the Circular Cities Declaration and the community of committed cities and regions that we're trying to build can also help, of course, in this area as well, because so many of us are facing similar issues. Okay, so there's several questions that have been placed in the chat. The first of these relates to the possibility of the declaration going global. It's actually something I'll return to right at the very end of the session, so we'll skip over that for the time being, but it's great to hear the interest and enthusiasm there. Second question is to both cities. How do citizens get involved in pushing city governments towards circularity? So is there pressure from citizens pushing the city governments? Who would like to answer this?
Maybe
Juno, over to Esh or
maybe
Eric.
maybe not really direct pressure on the topic of circular economy, but it comes through protecting the environment, climate goals. There is definitely a certain pressure and dynamic here in Ash, and certain actions going on that emerge from civil society or that are being put forward by civil society towards the politicians, without the people knowing that what they're proposing is part of a circular economy strategy. So what we are doing, especially myself, as a bit of the link between the government official, the local officials, and civil society and other organizations, is to translate what comes from the people, from the citizens locally, bring it back to the team here, to Jeannot and the team, and to then spread the word internally, maybe look to get some funding, look to convince politicians to support this or that project. So that's quite an interesting dynamic and chance that we have here in Ash. So this good link that we have with well, the officials here of the city.
I would also say circular economy here in Ash grows by groups. We have interesting groups. I would not say citizens, but groups who create something. And they have an idea for, let's say, house of the bicycle, for example. Let's just animate this, or a landing platform for electric tools or garden tools, and or our recycling center that is doing exactly the same as Sigmund just told in Oslo. We have a big national-wide WhatsApp group where all material is almost collected, and everything that is collected there is redistributed in the circuit to schools, to interested association, etc., etc. So there are a lot of small incubators, but there's not the whole society and not the most citizen implicated. But we see little flashlights coming up and illuminating this whole thing a little bit, and it's quite interesting to see, because there are a lot of small measures coming up, and we as a municipality try to understand the projects and also to help them to grow and to come to life in different projects.
Interesting. Okay, and Sigrun, from your side, from Oslo's side,
I think it's we have politicians that are really kind of hands-on or want to get this through, but also we have quite a few groups and incubators and innovation companies that are doing certain things to promote circularity. So I think it's kind of spreading from all over the city, actually, in different fields.
Okay, perfect. So the other question here relates to circular procurement. Sigrun, this is something you already talked about in some detail, and the actions that Oslo is taking here. In the case of Esh, is the procurement something you've also looked closely at within the city administration?
It's something we would, but actually, in reality, we don't really not go too far with the procurement. But it's something we try to implement to normal things like paper or even furniture. We pay attention on circular criteria, but we try to go further on the buildings. We wanted to have a circular approach from the ground on. So even if we put on the infrastructure, so from the infrastructure to the building, we want to try to implement in the next future these criteria. So it's much further than just procurement. So buying an electric car or a car with recycled stuff, or I don't know. But we are thinking on this, and we're trying to get some strategy in these areas. But we are not quite on level we want to be.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks. I think we better call the discussion to a close there and move off to our next subject. But certainly on the topic of procurement, I think Oslo can also play a really exemplary role. And there's a lot of information that's already published about how Oslo is approaching procurement, sustainable procurement, circular procurement. Which is certainly available to be shared. But in any case, in the interests of time, I think we will have to move on to our next topic. And I would like to pass across to Kristin Sandberg from Circle Economy. To look at regenerating nature, the missing piece. So, Kristin, over to you.
Thank you all very much. There we go. We're sitting in the same room, so it's always a little bit of technical issues. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Kristin. I work as a city strategist at Circle Economy, an impact organization in the Netherlands. And I'm here to present the deep dive that we've worked on with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation on regenerating nature, which for many of you might not be a very obvious part of the circular agenda. So let us start a little bit from the beginning. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the circular economy, we often focus on, for example, reusing solutions or recovering important resources and rethinking how we make and consume products. But there's a vital element that we sometimes overlook and that we miss in our agenda, and that is the regenerating nature part. So what do we actually mean when we speak about regenerating nature in an urban context? So instead of continuously degrading nature, a regenerative nature directly builds natural capital by rethinking how it builds, plants, and grows urban areas. So working with nature can create more healthy and thriving and more resilient cities that will benefit both people, but also the natural environment. So what does this really look like in cities, and how well are the 54 European cities doing across Europe? So this is exactly what we asked for the CCD signatories in this deep dive. So let me go through the results. Next slide, please. All right, there. So when asked to score their progress on regenerating nature, the cities landed on an average of 3 out of 5. And there was a shared consensus that nature is a key driver for multiple social benefits, such as enhancing human well-being and health, but also as a key tool to adapting and mitigating climate change, and especially the extreme weathers that come from the climate change. And nature and biodiversity plans were reported by 63 cities as their main steering document. And in general, we saw that the Northern European cities, they came forward as the drivers for more holistic approach to regenerating nature across space. So both in urban, but also rural areas to foster the more regenerating efforts in urban spaces. But we also saw in these plans that the majority of cities, they were lacking more quantifiable targets to regenerating nature efforts, which made it a bit difficult to actually monitor the progress of nature efforts in the cities. So let's see how this is actually done on the ground. So what are cities actually doing to regenerate nature? Next slide, please. So more than half of the cities identified both urban and spatial planning processes as decisive ways to regenerate nature. So protecting and restoring nature include both safeguarding important natural spaces at the master plan level, so more strategic level, which was done in Oslo, but also in Valongo and Porto in Portugal. But we also saw that mapping out and steering the urban development through densifying and protective measures, such as in Malmö, was also a great way of protecting the important areas across Malmö. Several cities, including Eskilstuna, but also Espoo and Fingal, systematically assess natural areas in all land use planning processes. And that is also a key element for long-term nature planning. And also to exempt the most important natural spaces from development. Restorative measures were also identified as a key element, ensuring that the important natural values such as swamps and rivers are restored or rewilded, which has actually been done in Esch, where the river crossing through the city is now in the plan to be rewilded. And then connecting that nature was also identified as a critical element to ensure that nature's connectivity across urban and rural areas are ensured. And this is done by, for example, green corridors that connects the natural areas in the cities, but also with the rural areas. And this has been done in Paris and Florence and Manresa, for example. And then we also saw that urban planning processes were found to be critical instrument to create space for nature. So balancing the urban development, but also the regenerating needs of the cities. So here we saw examples from Braga and Torres Vedra that will create space for nature by including pocket parks around the urban landscape. And then finally, we saw that urban planning was identified also as a key tool to grow and build cities with nature, and this includes regenerating contaminated lands, such as through brownfield regeneration, which was also done in Esch, but also in Mechelen, Ghent, and Zurich, but also to build with materials that lessen the environmental impact, which is, for example, bio-based materials, but also repurposed materials. We have a presentation here from Copenhagen later. They use, for example, DGNB Gold certification for all their public constructions, which sets very strong requirements for the building materials that they use in the cities. So these are some systematic ways that cities are working with urban and spatial planning to include nature efforts. And if we move on to the next slide, we see that also food policies was a key leverage to include regenerating natures in cities. 67% of the cities actually reported that leveraging food policies was a key element to promote regenerating nature. And this includes specific actions such as programs for farmers to promote nature-friendly farming practices. And this was done, for example, in Ljubljana, but also in Izmit, if I remember correctly, where they provide technical assistance to farmers, but also through educational campaigns. And then we also saw that multiple cities, which we also heard from Esch previously, that they provide municipally owned land to host local farming cooperatives. And this has also been done in Izmit, where they also include school programs. So they both serve the food that is being made through these farms to be served as lunch, but also to use these farms as educational activities to promote sustainable food practices and what it really means to grow our own food. So both through the educational, but also through regenerating the urban lands. And then finally, we also have the creation of local food markets alongside regional nature-friendly labels as key leverages in cities such as Braga, Évora, Mechelen, and Zurich again. And this is both to encourage sustainable food consumption and production in the cities, but also as a more educational way as well to promote the local foods. And then here we have the procurement, which was also identified by cities like Copenhagen, Oslo, and Malmö as key leverage to support local friendly, nature-friendly food production. So here we see that using the governmental purchase power is really a key leverage to promote more nature-friendly consumptions in schools and care centers, for example. Next slide, please. So if we just look at some of the challenges that we found in the regenerating nature efforts in cities. Several cities, they expressed the will to assess the nature footprint of urban resource flows, but reported the lack of tools and data as a main challenge for this. But we also saw that 3 main cities in Finland, actually Turku, that we'll be presenting later, but also together with Helsinki and Tampere, are joining forces to develop a shared tool. And we see that this is a really exciting process that we are also eager to follow. Where they will set up shared processes to measure the nature footprints and also what data will be needed for that process. We also saw another main challenge expressed was the spatial conflicts as a main challenge. So where the need of growing populations stand against the nature protective measures. And also in connection to the spatial conflicts, the lack of municipally owned land was also considered a challenge for several cities, where the collaboration with the private landowners to encourage more regenerative efforts was reported as quite difficult and a large challenge for the cities. And then we also saw that the lack of holistic frameworks to fully integrate the regenerative efforts was reported as a common challenge. And this results in quite a lot of cities still being in an exploratory phase and still building the case to what it means to regenerate nature and how they include this across all departments. So if we just summarize, I know I only have 1 minute, so I will try to be fast. But next and the final slide for me are just 3 main recommendations that we saw and we take out of this report. So perhaps the most obvious of them all, avoid nature conversion, both in urban but also in rural areas. And this can be enabled by building cities from within, through, for example, the brownfield regeneration that I spoke about, but also exploring innovative ways of building the cities or urban growth through, for example, repurposing existing buildings, but also a parasitic architecture, for example, and also setting up multifunctional usage of urban space so we maximize what we already have. And then the second, increase nature regeneration in cities. So nature should not just be considered in rural areas, but also in the urban. So we saw the tools, for example, 330-300, which is where 3 trees should be seen from every home. 30% tree canopy should be covered in every neighborhood, and each citizen should have their nearest public park 300 meters from their home. So this has been applied in cities like Malmö and Haarlem, and where we see this inclusivity to nature across all urban spaces. And lastly, the measuring and mitigating the nature footprint of the urban resource flows, where we see it as a key element. So nature footprint reduction measures can be also enabled by prioritizing design and construction choices that favor the more bio-based or circular building materials, but also opt for buildings that are more adaptable for future needs. So we don't actually need to tear them down in the future. And then finally, they also foster the regenerative food production is a key here in the nature footprint as well, by mandating more nature-friendly food procurement, of course, and allocating the municipally owned land that we spoke about. So just as a key summary, 10 seconds more, we see that a lot of exciting work is done across Europe, but we also see that it's still in this exploratory phase. So we hope that this deep dive can be both inspiration to learn from each other, but also an encouragement to find these more systemic ways and the systematic way of addressing the regenerating efforts, both across the departments, but also across the both urban and rural spaces. So really exciting work.
Christine, excellent. Thank you very much for that overview. Really interesting topic. And as we say, something that's very much unexplored, or well, starting to be explored encouragingly, but still very much underdeveloped, I would say. And a very important part of seeing that our linear, exploitative, extractive, destructive economy needs to be a circular and regenerative economy. And I think these ideas around a nature footprint, for example, are really interesting. So we'll follow those examples with great interest. And so now let's pass across two of the city examples that we have from the report. And the first of those is the city of Turku, and I'll pass across to Iris. Over to you.
Thank you. I'll just try to share my slides just a moment.
I think you're muted, Iris.
Oh, really? Okay, let me see. Can you hear me now?
We can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's so weird. Let me. The microphone. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can
hear you. Yeah.
All working perfectly in the testing.
Okay. You can't?
Oh, it's maybe on our side.
No, yeah.
Yeah, because the mic is open.
Exactly.
All right, problem was completely outside. We had the sound turned off. So I think that for the rest of you, you should be hearing it. It's absolutely fine. So Iris, please.
So you're
continue.
hearing me?
We are hearing you.
Yeah,
indeed,
good.
Yes.
So I will just start sharing my slides again. Let's see. Can you see now?
We can see. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So my name is Iris Kriikkula. I work at the City of Turku's Green Transition Unit as a circular economy project manager. For those of you who don't really know anything about Turku, or just a little bit, just a small overview, we are the former capital and oldest city of Finland, and should be still the capital in our opinion. We have 200,000 residents approximately, 2 universities and 4 universities of applied sciences. So every 4th student is a student of higher education. We are known for our rich culture, maritime, bio and diagnostic industries, and also from our beautiful archipelago. So just to give also an overview of our climate targets, we tend to think that climate, circular economy and nature are very much closely linked and should be solved together. So that's why I'm explaining about this. So by 2029, we will celebrate our 800th anniversary, and our aim is to become carbon neutral by then, and also climate positive from then onwards. This means that our net impact on climate will turn from warming to cooling. And we are already a global leading climate city, but we are also targeting of becoming a leading nature city by 2030. We are also aiming at reaching fully sustainable use of natural resources and waste-free society by 2040. And we are one of the EU 100 mission climate neutral and smart cities among 5 other cities in Finland. And in March, we were also awarded with the European Commission's mission label. So we're very proud of that. So we updated and revised our climate plan in 2022 and have raised the target of greenhouse gas emission reductions even higher. So far we have reduced 56% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the 1990 level, and actually the number is even higher, but it has to go to the city council first before we can publish it. So, but it's above 60%. The biggest reductions, as you can see from this graph, are coming from the heating and electricity sector. And we have also reduced 1/3 of the mobility greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 level, but mobility is currently the largest sector of emissions. So we need to do many things to bring that sector down. But to reach our climate targets, we really need to tackle all the emissions from all sectors. Just to go back, so that's the share of renewables from the energy sector is currently 90%, but 2025 it should be already 95%. So the energy sector is really being transformed into renewable ones, and we've invested over 500 million over the 10 years to turn the energy sector into renewable energy sourced one. So we will reduce 90% of all the emissions and compensate the rest by increasing carbon sinks. As for the compensation of 10% or more, the main emphasis on local measures, for example, forest management, plays a significant role. We apply a continuous cover forestry in city-owned forests. And then there's also the local compensation model, and these two have major links to biodiversity. Well, the developing operational environment is a challenge. There are no clear guidelines for municipal level compensation in Finland. But to tackle this, we have this municipal sink Kuntanielu project that aims to tackle this challenge. The main objectives of the project is to allow cities to increase the net carbon sink of the land use sector and to lay the foundation for the rules of the city level offsetting that will enable cities to reach carbon neutrality. And then we're also developing a model of engaging the Turku group and other companies in carbon sink and biodiversity actions. And it is also essential that we get the private landowners to participate, as the forests are carbon sources at this point. So through the Circular Turku project in partnership with ICLEI and the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, we have developed and launched the Circular Turku roadmap, which was approved by the city board in November 2021. And there were over 200 stakeholders involved in defining the circular economy interventions that have 5 key sectors. There's the energy system, food value chains, water cycles, transport and logistics, and buildings and constructions. Was that 5? Yeah, I think so. So we are one of the first cities globally that have included circular economy in our climate plan to help address the greenhouse gas emissions and protect also biodiversity in a systematic manner. We also want to connect the Circular Turku roadmap to the city's action plan for biodiversity protection and maximize the positive biodiversity impacts of the interventions identified in the roadmap. So nature, we consider nature is a very important resource for Turku and biodiversity. Excuse me?
2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. So maybe I need to jump a little bit. Yeah, okay. So as you might know, that the surface area of Turku is less than 0.1% of the entire surface of area in Finland, but we have offer a home for approximately 12% of all species classified as endangered in Finland. Therefore, we need to do a lot in our area. So the action plan for biodiversity protection is actually quite unique because it doesn't concentrate just on the strategic level, but it concentrates on the actual actions that we need to take to reach the targets. But to jump, so there's also this great example of urban biodiversity park. We received the substantial EU project funding, so it is quite different from ordinary parks, protected areas, because urban biodiversity is actively regenerated and increased. And I wonder, the climate budget is actually a very interesting part, but do we have time to go there?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
We do,
Okay.
yes,
Yes. So you're interested to hear about it. So because we have a major ownership or a major stake in several important companies, including energy and water utilities. So our goal has been to establish an innovative climate budgeting model that ensure that the substantial investments made in the city group are in line with our climate and nature targets. So how do we evaluate the sustainability of these investments is by using the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy classification as our framework. And over the next 4 years, we will invest a total over 1.2 billion euros to projects that meet the taxonomy criteria, and we found that 80% of our investments actually meet the criteria. But maybe jump a little bit forward. So this is, if I have time, I just wanted to share with you, this is the last thing, the resource-wise energy water system, that is also one of our priority topics. So there's the Kakola wastewater treatment plant, which is a prime example of a systemic circular water concept in Turku. It's located at the center of Turku, owned by 14 municipalities, and it processes the wastewater of around 300,000 residents in the region. And when it started operating in 2019, 99% of organic matter and phosphorus and over 80% of nitrogen are removed, which has had a huge impact on the nearby sea area. And not only does the plant recover nutrients to be used as fertilizers in agriculture, but it's also energy positive and produces 10% of all the heat used in Turku area. And in addition, sludge is used as biogas for the transportation sector. It's very close to Turku Castle, so if you have any chances of visiting Turku, I think you should also visit the Kakala wastewater treatment plant. It's quite impressive. And because I'm running out of time, so I will just say thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And once again, I'm so very sorry for rushing. I know that Turku is doing so much that we could easily flesh this presentation out for a whole day. I can also verify that Turku is a wonderful place to visit. If, of course, you can get there in a carbon neutral manner, which is slightly more challenging, but a lot to show everybody in any case. Thank you, Iris. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity for some questions after this as well. But I'd like to pass across now to our final speaker from the city of Copenhagen, Annemette, with a particular focus on the topic of food in Copenhagen.
Yes.
Annemette, over to you.
I put on some earphones. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Oh, that's great. I hope the sounds a little bit better with these on. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about food, which is my area of work. I work with food within the development of the new climate plan. But today I'm going to say something about the food strategy that we have in Copenhagen. So please give me the next slide. Yes. So just to give you some background, we serve a lot of meals daily to our citizens in nursing homes and schools and daycare, more than 70,000 meals we serve to them, and we have a lot of staff and kitchen units also to work with in the city, and we spend a lot of money on the procurement of food every year, and we also I think it's about 10% of the public spendings on food procurement that comes through the city of Copenhagen. Yes, next slide, please. So there's been this development of the food strategy, and our initiatives within the food area we've worked on those for more than 20 years now. Starting out with some targets on organic food in public meals and in kindergartens in particularly, and increasing these targets all along. So we started out by 75% target. Now we are up on a 90% target. And we also have targeted different, of course, areas. So one is the children's food, and the other is a nursing home and elderly people's food and social institutions. So please move on. Yeah, just put them all on there. Just yeah. So go one back. Yeah. So in the current food strategy, which runs until next year, 25. We have set out 5 overall themes that we work within. So one is to provide correct nutrition and promote health to our citizens. The second is that to focus on taste and quality and food appreciation also as a focus. And then we have some sustainability and climate targets that we also set within the food area. We also have a focus on strengthening communities and food culture and food literacy within the public in general. And then finally, we want to promote Copenhagen as what we call healthy, green and vital food city for all Copenhageners, which also includes tourists coming into Copenhagen. So some of the elements that we have to promote this healthy, green and vital city is to support the growth of the sustainable food sector, both within the food production within the area surrounding Copenhagen, and also the food sector in terms of small restaurants and small businesses that grow up in order to build more sustainable food production and initiatives. We also focus on urban gardening to give people access to those spaces, and for instance on rooftops, but also in local areas and where people live. For instance, where I live in the city, we have the opportunity to register to have a space to grow our own vegetables, for instance, or to grow flowers or something. and we also have park areas dedicated to this. And this also is related to another target, which is to enhance biodiversity in general, to create more living spaces for wild bees and insects within the city. So next slide, please. So we have some quite focused targets within this food strategy. So in terms of reducing the climate footprint, we have set the target to that we have to reduce by 25% by 2025, and we measure that target in terms of the food that we purchase within the city. We have a target for organic food, which should reach 90% in all our servings. And then we have also set a target in terms of food waste and to reduce food waste in our public institutions. And this is set to be 50% reduction measured in quantity in 2030. And we have a milestone by 2025 of 15% reduction. Yeah. Next one, please. So to point out some of the ways that we have used to achieve these goals, I would focus on this food procurement approach, where we have prolonged the way we interact with the suppliers. So in order to better work with them and to make them able to meet our requirements, we've now set 2 years tenders instead of shorter terms. We set up some criteria in these tenders. So they are supported to support these goals of organic and climate reduction targets. And we also work a lot to build up smaller contracts so that smaller local producers are able to also reach us as a big city with their offers, because usually it's more easy for bigger companies to reach a big city like us, because they have the resources to do that and to write up these offers that they give us. But we try to support the smaller ones. Also, we have a big focus on training our culinary or our kitchen staff, and we use culinary advisors to do that. We have some counseling programs to reach all the institutions that we have that work with food for elderly and children, and they have courses and are educated to better produce food and meals and to present it to the people who are going to eat it, so as to enhance the quality of the food, but also to work with the acceptability among the children and the elderly to actually want to eat this food. Yeah, so we work intensively with that, and we also work on a communication level with making inspirational material, recipes, which are also distributed to the public in general, and to make celebrations and events, so that in order to put focus and recognize the efforts of our kitchen staff, for instance, and what is done out there. And finally, we also work with these guidelines that makes it easier for the kitchens to transform the meals into sustainable and healthy food in an easy way. And we have some researchers to follow, for instance, the consequences, if there are any consequences in terms of nutrition when we transform the food that we serve, and to make sure that we still meet the nutritional requirements, for instance, of elderly. Yes, please. Next one. So just to point out how far we are now, we just had a status report coming out, which showed that out of these 25% in terms of reaching our climate goals, we have reached 17.6% reduction compared to our baseline measure. We are at 85% organic percentage of everything we serve in our food procurement. And finally, we have established some of the baseline measures for food waste in some of the areas, but this is actually one of the challenges we have, is to measure food waste in a good way. And I would like some advice on this from some of you, maybe, or to hear how you work with that. Last slide, please. So the next steps, the current food strategy is going to run out by the end of next year. So right now, the politicians and the administration that are in charge of this strategy, they are working to find out if it should be renewed, if we should have a new strategy, or if these food targets should be built into other policies, for instance. For instance, that could be the climate plan. That is what I'm working with, for instance. We're going to have a new climate plan coming that's going to work from 2026 to 2035. This climate plan is also going to target the food area. And as a new thing, this city has decided that to set a target to reduce consumption-based emissions by 50% in 2035. So as food takes up about 20% of the emissions that we have from consumption, it is a very important area that we're going to focus on. We do this in different ways. We are working on these initiatives right now. The politicians have not decided on them yet, but we try to target to work out initiatives that target groups, communities, and have structural level initiatives-based interventions. And that as a new role as a city, we not only work within the areas that we can control, like our own daycare institutions or nursery homes, but we try to find out what kind of role as a facilitator for change can we as a city take on, for instance, and to cooperate with businesses and civil societies and to try to facilitate change. So that is a new role for us as a city, and we work to find out how to do that. Yes, that was my words, I think.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Anna-Mette, and really amazing to hear the ambitions of Copenhagen and how long this program has been under development, how much attention has been paid to it. And I think very interesting again to see the focus on procurement with what you're doing and the collaborative activities that you're undertaking with the regional suppliers as well, and finding intelligent ways to make that system work. So it's really an inspirational example for the others as well. We have a number of questions that have now been included in the chat here. The first of those, looking at how cities, or how to encourage other cities to prioritize the bioeconomy, so biological circularity supported by nature, also including nature-based solutions, with the statement that most cities are now focusing on more technical circularity, such as metals and plastics. I think our statistics at the beginning from the report showed that actually a number of the cities that we have are focusing on the area of the bioeconomy. Okay, another question relates to soil in particular here, and do any of the cities work on repurposing soil coming from deconstruction? And by extension, another question related to soil, does Turku use regeneration of soils as carbon sinks? And if so, how?
Well, to answer the last questions, we do, but I should ask some of my colleagues who are more into this topic about the examples. But I was just writing my reply when Simon asked his first question, so I kind of lost it. Sorry. But there's this very great example of regeneration of soils used as a carbon sinks in the Turku region. So I will just post it, so you can take a look at it, and I can get back with the insights of our experts on soils.
Excellent. That sounds very good. We've also been working on a project recently called City Loops, which has looked a lot at soil and repurposing soil, reusing soil. So that might be also an interesting link for the audience to look at. A question that I would have myself first to Iris is really about how you have successfully combined these two topics of climate and regenerate nature as well, and avoided these being addressed as separate siloed issues within Turku. Maybe you can talk a bit about that process.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. So I think that in the 5 selected priority topics in our circular economy roadmap already have a potential to deliver this biodiversity benefits. But as the water cycle that I already mentioned is one of our success stories, but we still need to support this more overall shift to consumption and production patterns that work with rather than against nature. And we still need to build on and expand our existing practices. But in my opinion, it's like where we need to still develop is perhaps the land use. It plays a significant role, especially, like I said, like the private landowners and farmlands in agriculture and forest owners. We need to have them more involved and also offer them support in starting to take these regenerative methods. And in our expanding city, we need to, where we have these contradicting targets that we need to build new apartments while we also seek to protect biodiversity. But we do have methods like planning our infrastructure, stormwater management, using natural-based water treatment solutions, and perhaps utilizing regenerative materials in constructions. But it's currently happening in pilot projects, so we still need to expand that a lot more and bring circular economy and biodiversity more closely together. But as for how to tackle the siloing, we are currently developing in collaboration with Ramboll, which is a consultancy company, this new Turku leadership and management model, where we are trying to bring climate, circular economy, and nature as cross-cutting sectors to the city, the whole city organization. And in practice, this means that we are aiming to bring all of these 3 topics as normal part of everyone's job in each department and unit in our city. And we are especially targeting our middle management level, so they see that what sort of resources is required to really see that this biodiversity, circular economy, and climate are more closely will be connected and be part of our city's work everywhere.
Fantastic, really interesting, Iris. Thanks for that. Anna-Metta, maybe I can move to you and ask, obviously you've got very, very ambitious targets with what you're trying to achieve in Copenhagen, but could you talk us through some of the challenges that you've been facing in trying to meet these targets?
That you mean the targets for the food strategy, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Actually, I think we are quite certain that we're going to reach the target of a 25% reduction. But of course, this will be a challenge because now we have set new targets for the city as such, and are going to the politicians have decided this 50% reduction target for the city as such, which will make it seem unambitious to stay at a 25% reduction ambition for the citizens that we have in our nursing homes and in our schools. So this is one of the exciting things that's going to be, I think, negotiated. What target should we set in the future if there's going to be a future food strategy for that? But I think one of the major challenges, which I also mentioned, is this measuring of food waste. How we do that in practice, because we have. I'm quite new in this administration, but as far as I've understood, we have worked with it for several years to try to find out good ways to do that. And we have also had different approaches to doing it, but it all turns out to be quite time-consuming and expensive to have people come and sort out your garbage and try to find out what is edible, what is non-edible, and because institutions work very differently, it's difficult to find some method that suits all kinds of institutions. We have big institutions, we have small institutions. Some of the food is made at a centralized kitchen, others is made locally. And the way that children consider and handle food in everyday lives in the school, it's very difficult to find out how much food is wasted, been thrown out in the general garbage, how much goes into the food waste bin, and all these things. So it's really complex to follow if we can actually meet the targets there. So I'm very curious to hear if some of you have solved this this nut or whatever you call it, this challenge in how you work with food and food waste. If it's within any of your areas, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm very happy if anyone wants to jump in and, of course, answer that. We can also send a question around to the network and see what sort of responses we get, Anna-Mette, because, of course, I think this is an issue that's facing all cities again. And better to try to solve these issues together rather than individually, as always. Okay, one final question before I come back to our priority actions, and this is a question I think I throw open to all, and particularly looking at Esh, a question that was put into the chat was about tips for how smaller municipalities can start to include circularity. Of course, this question is open to all, but maybe to Esh in particular.
Yeah. Listen to initiatives. That's one tip I can give. So listen to good ideas that come from different levels. Just listen to them and yes, try to help them and try to implement them. That's how we learned works best and easiest and fastest.
Listening is always a positive message, I think, General. Thank you very much for that. Okay, well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think we'd like to return to the report, the conclusions that came out of the report that Josh mentioned right at the beginning. There are 6 areas for priority action. Josh, I don't know whether possibly you could reshare that slide with the group so we can see it all, but I can also read through those because I would like them to hear from each of the cities as a final message, perhaps, on which of those messages chimes most with you, which you feel that is something that you can work on directly. So the first of those is working towards common circularity metrics. So how we measure, very similar to what we were just discussing with Anna-Mette. Second, setting more ambitious targets, including on consumption emissions. Number 3, integrating circularity across city departments to unlock resources. 4, innovating new circular systemic solutions. 5, advocating at different levels for a new paradigm. And finally, 6, embedding nature into all decision making. So I think all of these have been mentioned throughout the presentations that we've had, but I'd like to hear from each city one by one which of those they think is particularly interesting, relevant, something that they themselves want to prioritize. So would any of the cities like to start? Anna-Mette, yes, please, over to you. And maybe we can stop sharing the slide as well so we can see people's faces again. Thanks, Josh.
I think one of the ones that is the most relevant or interesting to me, of course, we have set very ambitious targets, but it's the one of advocating. Well, how is it framed? Advocating the what?
I should have left it on. Advocating for a new paradigm.
Yes, advocating for a new paradigm, because that is I think it's for me, I mean, it's very important that it's going to take place, that the politicians start to communicate this paradigm of preserving nature and preserving the planet and taking care of it as a top priority to the citizens. But I think it's a very challenging task for them because they're it's always challenged by other interests, economic interests of the city, making the city function as an economic unit, not pushing the companies too far, trying to work with them rather than against them. It's always this dilemma, I think, across the board. And at the same time, we have this time pressure to make these changes happen. So I think it's a quite challenging field to work within right now. And I'm not sure how we're going to solve that problem for the politicians, how we're going to make it easier for them to communicate this new paradigm and promoting it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks. Well, I'm very glad you picked up on with this one, Annemette. I think this is one of the ones that perhaps wasn't mentioned so much in the previous presentation. So really good to hear, and I think extremely important, of course. Iris, you next.
Yeah, thank you. I actually chose 3 because I'm not very good at limiting these topics, as you could see from my slides. But there's the work towards common circular economy metrics that I think all cities really need, and there's not enough metrics yet available. And then there's the setting more ambitious targets, including on consumption emissions, that you could see that cities are already doing it, including us. So, but we are at the very early stages, so we're assessing the consumption-based emissions, but not yet setting targets based on those. But that's going to be the next step. And of course, then there is the embedding nature in all decision making. So the leadership and management model that I was just briefly talking about is something that we want to achieve, also the embedding the nature more in the decision making. But like I said, we're at the early stages, so we're not there yet. So we need to do a lot more. So I think these 3 topics are really close and important.
Excellent. Thanks, Iris. Yes, I certainly don't want to limit each of you to one specific area or activity, so that's great to hear. Maybe then from either Oslo or Esh.
We'll go with what Annemette has already said. So we go for the paradigm shift that is definitely necessary, and time is running out without wanting to sound too negative, but that's the reality we are facing. Luckily, we have the politicians on board, but there's still a long way to have also all different, especially the strategic departments on board from our municipal administration. We also have a few, well, the citizens we start on board them, plus we have local NGOs that are working towards the same topic and goal as well, but it's still a long way to go to have everyone on board and work towards the same target of protecting nature and climate. And then the big challenge is to find the right way between, let's say, incentives and on the other side, bans, and pushing people to make more efforts towards climate protection. That is our the everyday challenge that we are facing. That's why we also go for this the necessary paradigm shift that we're working on here in Ash.
Great to hear. And of course, from our side, we're looking here for cities collectively to advocate for this new paradigm at the European level as well. And of course, we know that there's a very important political change happening at the moment with the new commission, the new parliament due to come in, a new direction to be set. And so our aim, certainly within the CCD and more widely with the cities we're working in, is to try and provide a voice within that European policy-making framework for this paradigm shift and for a supportive regulatory and policy environment for circularity. And of course, it's extremely important to have the support of the cities within this group, within this network, for that. So this is really great to hear as well, the enthusiasm for this. Sigrun, from Oslo's side, any of these in particular speak to you?
Yeah, I think they are all important, and I was initially thinking of this getting the same or more common circular metrics, but also to get there, we really need to innovate new circular systemic solutions. So I think that is really we haven't found everything, and it's really difficult to reach our goals unless we change many things. So I think that one was in particular speaking to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sigrun. I think we've managed to cover almost all of the priority actions in that case across the cities, which is really fantastic to hear. Okay, but we're coming to the end now. We're 1 minute away from the end of the session, but I did just quickly want to come back to my slides before we close. This was a comment that was put in the chat as well, asking about if the Circular Cities Declaration is going global. So this is at the moment restricted to European cities and regions to sign the declaration, but we are currently exploring, is it possible for us to expand this onto the global stage? And just to give you a quick rundown of why we're looking at this, and what the most important reason is the interest that we are receiving from other cities in different world regions for this type of initiative. I think we can see in Europe that this has been successful and also wanted and fits well with other initiatives that are happening. So we're seeing from other world regions that they're looking for something similar. So this is driving us to explore, is that possible? So it's great to hear there's interest from the audience on this. I think importantly also what the CCD is trying to do within Europe is to underline the role of cities in fostering this circular transition. And of course, it's even more important to try and do this at the international level. So if we can do that collectively, globally, then hopefully our reach can be even higher. We are, one of the prime functions of the network within Europe is to exchange experiences, to transfer knowledge between cities, ideas, challenges, solutions, etc. But of course, this can equally be done on the global scale. I think we have a lot to learn from other cities and regions, as the last couple of days have actually shown us as well, I would say. And finally, I think there's also a clear need for us to try to align. So we've mentioned this particularly around the indicators at the moment for how we'd align that, but also more generally aligning what we mean by circularity at the city level. So we're really all working in a similar direction. So from our side, we see that there's a lot of scope for doing something like this. What we don't have at the moment is funding for doing this. So this is something that we are searching for at the moment. But of course, we don't want to do an initiative like this unless it is properly resourced. So this is still an ongoing question, but hopefully there will be more news about this within the coming weeks and months. So please keep your ears open for any news on that. Okay, and with this, I would like to close our session for this afternoon. We're almost on time. So thanks very much once again to all of our speakers, really inspiring presentations. I hope the audience has got a lot out of that. There's plenty more to be found within the report as well, so I would encourage everybody to look and read at that. And yeah, thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a nice afternoon.